capitalized on the three unique attributes that people have that nothing else has. They can think, they can speak, and they can feel. Thus, they can be passionate about the job. The job can have meaning. I really believe this is a distinguishing characteristic of modern supervision, the realization that employees perform best when they control their actions. Now, how do we make that happen? Well, if we're going to make that happen, we have to have productive relationships. And one way to think about that is to recognize that when we have an interaction with someone, it really has two purposes. One is the short-term one of accomplishing whatever the purpose was, but the second is to improve the relationship, that we've increased trust.
Bob, how can someone improve trust in a relationship?
Karen, that's a fantastic question. Obviously, it's a very complex question, but the key to it is fairness. When we're working with employees, when we're making decisions, when we're talking to them, we have to be fair. It's not just about being nice. Just being nice is actually a common approach. We're trying to make them happy, but it's not effective because it's not always fair. What we'd like to do quickly is look at 3 skills that you can develop and refine and become better at to be a better supervisor. The first is active listening. I truly believe that listening is key to developing trust, the key to high performance, the key to having great employees. Here are 2 skills that I suggest you work on developing. One is get in the habit of having a short pause before you respond in a conversation. That shows that you're listening. It avoids the risk of interrupting, and probably most importantly, you actually hear what the other person is saying. You also can ask questions for clarification. I use tell me more to get people to really be clear so you can understand what they're saying. The second skill is positive feedback. Most of us have been trained to work with cows, to work with crops, to work with machinery. We don't need positive feedback there because they don't have the attributes of thinking, hearing, and feeling. Employees do. They respond very positively to positive feedback. Specific positive feedback builds confidence. It builds commitment to what they're trying to do. It builds commitment to the organization. Positive feedback is key.
Bob, positive feedback is a great tool, but what about those employees that don't do what they are told?
Great question, Karen. Unfortunately, that's often the case, okay? And one of the things that really is important here is we're going to introduce a third type of feedback called redirection. This diagram helps us explain that. Typically, we think of 2 kinds of feedback. Positive feedback for good performance and negative feedback, typically viewed as a reprimand for unacceptable performance. I implore you to get rid of that simplistic idea forever, because it is incomplete. And the reason it's incomplete is that there are 2 possibilities when performance is not up to expectation. The first one, the red area on the screen, is that the employee, in fact, could have attained the performance but didn't work hard enough, wasn't focused, whatever the case may be. That could indeed call for a reprimand and negative feedback. But that leaves this green area. Performance was not up to snuff. Positive feedback's inappropriate, but it was out of the control of the employee. A negative feedback would be perceived as unfair. So we need a new type of feedback. We step in, we don't reprimand, we redirect the employee to successful performance. Executing our role as a supervisor and coach, we present whatever it takes to the employee. It may be additional coaching, additional training. We may have to change the goal, whatever it takes to enable the employee to succeed. And so these are our 3 supervisory skills: active listening, positive feedback, and redirection feedback.
Today we will talk about the secret to get better supervisory skills. As you look to grow your supervisory skills, there's a recipe to follow that has proven itself over and over. And this talk will review the basic recipe for growing any new skill, including any new supervisory skill. Now, when you take a supervisor training class, you're often shown what effective actions look like. The premise of many supervisor training classes is that if you are shown what to do, you will then take the appropriate action. Beyond what you're taught in class, there is another step to take to set yourself up for better results. And the recipe for improving any skill, whether it be a supervisor skill or otherwise, is included in these following steps. So step number 1, know what you want and why you want it. The basis of this step is to start with the finish in mind. In other words, what should the new outcome look like? Knowing why you want this new outcome brings in the element of personal motivation. If you can see personal value from taking the necessary steps to get the new outcome, you are much more likely to take the steps. So again, identify the new outcomes, and through that you increase your personal value and increase your personal motivation. Step number 2 is to take a personal inventory. After you take a supervisor course, you should know what you need to do differently to improve your supervisor skills. Taking a personal inventory makes a very personalized plan of action on what you need to do differently to align with what you've learned through the course and those new actions. Specifically, what do you need to stop doing that has been your habit to this point? What do you need to start doing? And what do you need to keep doing? This flow of stop, start, and keep applies to both your actions or your behaviors as well as to your thought patterns and your emotions. Step number 3 is to take a progress check. Taking time to check in on how you're doing with your thoughts, feelings, and actions lets you know where to focus more attention and energy. And as you begin your new supervisor training action plan, check in on a predetermined time frame and make a personal assessment as to how things are going. You might also get feedback from other folks who you trust and who are honest and supportive for you. Stopping in to check also gives you time to recognize your successes as well as celebrate your supervisor skill enhancement progress. Regardless of what outcomes you're looking to improve upon, applying the supervisor skill enhancement recipe will set you up for better outcomes and an easier ride to getting results through your team.
Supervising a group of people is a full-time job. The purpose of this video has been to describe your task without making it seem overly complex. Here are a few more tips to emphasize what's important. First, think of yourself as your team's #1 supporter. Their job is to do most of the work, and your job is to provide them with leadership and management services. I use the word services deliberately. It's realistic and pragmatic to think of your job as a service job, with your team as the primary customers of your services, and I encourage you to adopt this perspective. In order to give the best possible supervisory services, keep a keen eye out for things that can slow them down, bottlenecks, barriers, and problems, and then use whatever power you have as a manager to clear the way for them. Now you've given them their assignments, you've delegated tasks. If your team members know what they're doing, make sure you don't get in their way. Don't pester them with daily questions about how things are going, and please don't step in and do their jobs for them. And in that spirit, keep in mind what their top priorities are. If you need to ask them to do something else, if you have to add one more thing to their plate, make sure you explain how this new task fits in with everything else they have to do. If you aren't clear about this, they're likely to assume that you want it done immediately. Finally, here's a tip that works whether you're dealing with a team member or anyone else. If you need to ask someone to do something for you, be sure to explain why you want it. In the rush of a busy day, managers don't always take the time to do that, but it works like magic.
Observing performance. Look for evidence to support your impression of how employees do their jobs. Skill 2. Documenting poor performance. Treat documentation as a communication tool to preserve facts and remove ambiguities. Skill 3. Mastering constructive confrontation. Speak with clarity and purpose for maximum results. Skill 4. Evaluating performance. Give employees ongoing feedback on their performance so they always know what they're doing right and what they need to improve. Skill 5. Resolving coworker conflicts. Pick your battles and focus on shared goals to referee disputes effectively. Skill 6. Giving feedback. Express both good and bad input with judgment-free specificity so that it has a more positive, lasting impact on the employee. Old-school managers fold their arms across their chest, bark orders, and tell workers what they're doing wrong. With a perpetual scowl on their face, these managers point out every mistake, but rarely dish out praise. Skill 7. Delegating work and following up. Boost your efficiency and your team's morale by handing off assignments to the right people. Skill 8. Dispensing discipline. Treat disciplining as a way to educate employees and elevate their behavior, not as a form of punishment. Skill 9. Inspiring and praising employees to build morale. Energize employees by taking every opportunity to recognize their contributions and urging them to excel. Every conversation with your employees produces one of three results: positive impact, no impact, or negative impact. You want to create as many positive encounters as possible. Skill 10. Building your team. By choosing the right people and getting them to believe in a shared goal, you lay the groundwork for a winning team. Skill 11. Communicating effectively with upper management. Relate to the top brass on their terms and present your ideas as solutions to problems they face. Skill 12. Investigating complaints and incidents properly. Take an unbiased, fact-based approach when investigating employee complaints. Skill 13. Managing unfit-for-duty employees. Your top priority is protecting employees and providing a safe workplace. Skill 14. Acting to prevent violence. Awareness of the red flags that can signal violent behavior can save lives. Know the conditions that breed violence and protect your workplace from toxic conflict.